Welcome to Travel Stories Unpacked, the travel podcast where we talk about all things from the silly to the serious and everywhere in between. I am your host, Ashley Newton, and thank you so much for spending some of your time with me. I really appreciate it. And this week, we are going to unpack river cruises. We've talked about ocean cruises. Now we're going to talk about river cruises. And you might be wondering, what the heck is the difference? We are going to answer that for sure with my guest, Bri Greathouse. Welcome, Bri.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yep, first time on the pod, so I'm really excited to have you here. Bri and I both work for KHM Travel Group, so I cannot believe that it has taken us 38 episodes to get you on the show. This is crazy.
I know. I'm happy to be here. I'm an avid listener every Friday morning.
Gosh. Well, thank you so much. I love that. Start your morning with us, right?
Honestly. Yeah.
So first, I love the story of how you kind of went on your first river cruise. So I guess we'll just start there. How did you, get on this adventure?
Yeah, great question, because it was very unique in that I didn't pay for it. An event happened, in 2018, I believe it was, where Viking River Cruises held this big event that they called Boom the Room. And so this was down in Columbus, Ohio. They brought in travel agents and people who work in the industry to come join this big event, experience all this different food. They had different stations set up for local cuisine of places that they travel. And then they had kind of a game, a trivia game, where you answered questions, maybe 20 questions about Viking. And then they also peppered in just Ohio trivia, and you weren't allowed to.
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Ohio was the birthplace of what candy was one of the questions.
Dum-dums?
No, I think it was Laffy Taffy or something.
We actually have a couple different
quote
things
me
out
on
of
it.
here.
But you weren't allowed to use your phone to search anything. So it was you're just figuring this out.
Yeah.
And about 5 questions in, they said, okay, so you can start using your phones now. So our team went back and Googled the previous questions and then continued to use it. And us and a couple other tables of 10 won 8-night Viking river cruises.
So they're really just trying to give away some cruises. Because, come on, if you can Google it, that's not trivia. That's how well can you use your phone?
Yeah, I don't know if we got lucky. It was very fast paced and very chaotic, and you didn't know that you could use a phone going in. So yeah, I don't know how well we earned those, but I had a certificate in my hand when I walked out the door to go on a river cruise. So that's what I did.
That is incredible. Okay,
Yeah.
So you've won this river cruise.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, you've worked in travel for how long? Had you worked in travel before this?
Before this, 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's, I'm going to say, a good amount of time because that's how long I've been in the travel industry now. So I'm guessing at this point you were pretty familiar with Viking. You were pretty familiar with river cruises. But have you ever been on one or been interested in one?
No, up until that point, it was kind of this great concept, but they're very expensive. It was never something that I thought I would be able to do.
Gotcha.
It was not attainable in my brain at that point in time. And Viking does some U.S. river cruises, but European. This was a European river cruise, so I'd never been to Europe before. Out of the country to Mexico, yes, but this was a big trip. I kept calling it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'll never be able to do this on my own. So I was just grateful to have won this opportunity that I would, a once-in-a-lifetime trip.
Yeah. So it wasn't something that was necessarily on your bucket list, but not something that you weren't interested in.
Yeah.
So, it was just a really happy circumstance that now you had the ability.
That's correct.
To go and do it.
Yeah.
So tell me about the cruise itself. I believe you took a travel companion with you.
I took my dad with me.
Yeah, I just think that's so sweet. I never forgot that. I was like, that's such a nice opportunity.
Yeah. So my husband and I talked about it, and I don't know. My dad just has this traveler's spirit. And growing up, my family never really vacationed. My siblings were big into sports, travel, softball, and baseball. So
all your time and money.
That's exactly right. And then we live near Lake Erie. And so once a year for a week, we would rent a house at Lake Erie, and that was our vacation. But my dad is never met a stranger in his life, super outgoing, just I just knew that he and I would have an excellent time on this trip.
So, like,
So
he was born to travel, but never could
that's right.
himself, really, is how you felt about it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, if I'm being honest, then it's also not myself and my husband buying 2 plane tickets to Europe. It's me buying 1 and my dad buying 1. So
Totally get that, yeah.
the price did factor into it a sliver, but not very much. And yeah, he and I had an excellent time. I'm glad I took him.
Yeah, so that's incredible. So tell
Yeah.
me about the cruise itself. And honestly, I'm a little bit curious too about like the winning process. So like I remember, and I've talked about this on the podcast before, when my grandma won a trip through a contest in the Plain Dealer, which is like our local newspaper. There were still some like choices or variables. You know, it
Mhm.
wasn't like you have to go this specific date. So what was that like for you when you won it? Were they just like, this is a sailing, or did you have some choices? What was that like?
Yeah, there were a lot of options in choices, and it was for like a specific room category, but then you could always upgrade. So,
Let's take a second
yeah.
because I don't know if people know what room category means. So can you explain that?
Yes. So, basically, what we were given was kind of like a standard type room that we didn't have a balcony to our, I guess, room, our cabin, but we could open like a sliding glass door called a French
Yeah.
balcony.
Okay.
So that was, you could do that. You could have a balcony, a suite. So if you wanted to upgrade, you could, and you would pay additional for it. But
Gotcha.
there was no, I mean, it's a great. It's a great
So it's
cabin
just like
and
the
a great
level
room,
or
so
like
that's right.
category of your accommodations while on board.
Yeah, and I think that's up to the traveler a little bit too. Um, my dad and I didn't need anything extra because we weren't in our room unless we were sleeping. So on like a river ship, there's always like a top deck that you can go sit out on. So we didn't feel like we needed the balcony experience.
Gotcha.
Exactly.
Okay. So
Yeah.
then you were good with your room category. How did you then choose, where and when you were going to go?
Yeah. So in preparing for this event and hopefully winning a cruise, I did a lot of research and
I love that. You were like, I'm going to win.
we are winning. I'm going home with a cruise. So the Rhine River is what I chose. It just has a lot of castles and it's like, it just sounded like a really pretty trip. And we started in Amsterdam, which has become my favorite city in the world that I've ever been to, and ended in Basel, Switzerland. So we kind of ping ponged Germany and France, and it just seemed like a good trip. The castle thing was a bit of a draw, if I'm being honest with you. And yeah, it just seemed like a good option. And then to book it, we just contacted somebody through Viking, the person that they like wanted us to redeem this through, and we had a number of options for dates, so we weren't locked into one thing in particular. We ended up traveling in August, and something very interesting, which I did not think of until it was getting closer to the time, is there was not a lot of rain in Europe that year. So the river was very, very
Right.
low. And we were actually the last ship that was able to leave Amsterdam until they got some rain, I think, like a few days later.
That's
Then.
crazy.
Yeah, so we got very lucky, but we got a unique experience because the people who worked on the ship, there's like a program director who had been doing it for 10 plus years. He'd never seen the river as low as it was. So it was kind of cool to see things from a different perspective of it being a unique experience for the people on board as well.
And you mentioned a few little elements about the ship. And before I ask the question, I want to say that I'm not saying this is what all river cruise ships are like. I'm sure that they're all very different from brand to brand and, from category to category, size to size and all that. But how would you describe the vessel itself?
Ooh. So when I think of even the term ship, in the travel industry, it's a ship, it's not a boat.
I got yelled at for like my first year here because I would call them boats and be like, it's a ship, Ashley, it's a ship. Okay.
So the best way that I can explain this is when I looked at it, I thought it was a boat.
Okay.
It's so much smaller than your typical ocean cruise line.
Yeah.
Or cruise ship. So it is if you like walk onto the ship, there's kind of like your first floor, and then there's one more floor that's got additional rooms and restaurant and bar, lounge area, and then there's a top deck. and that's it. So there's stuff below you.
But as far as like what passengers can do, there's like 3 decks
Mhm.
worth of stuff,
Yeah,
basically.
about 200 passengers, so it's much
200
smaller.
passengers.
Yeah, and you get to know each other for that full week, which is
Ew. No.
wild. No, it's yeah, no, you kind of feel that way, but being there with my dad specifically, who's never met a stranger in his life, we met people that we just really connected with
Oh,
and
that's
bonded with.
awesome.
It was such an experience. I can't even compare anything else in my life to it.
Wow, okay.
Um,
I mean, 200 is
gosh,
small. You're not
it
gonna find
is.
like any like major resorts that are only. I mean,
Right.
that's boutique at that point. You
And
know.
there's one place to eat. You know, there's one
What do
restaurant,
you
and then
mean?
at lunch
There's one restaurant
there's
on the
one
ship.
yes, one
Really?
restaurant, and then
Is it a
there's also
buffet?
like a buffet. No,
Oh,
so
okay. So
separate.
there's a
A
sit
sit
down
down.
restaurant and a buffet.
Yeah, then they'll set up a buffet for like lunch and breakfast in kind of like their lounge area and one of their like outer decks. So yeah, it's much smaller, and you
Yeah.
end up sitting with what we did was for dinner, we kind of stayed with like the same table and group of people for
Did
the
you have
first few
to?
nights. Nope, don't have to at all. And then we would rotate here and there. And yeah, if you're having dinner, and gosh, we'll get into this too. So with a river cruise, most cruise lines, I can't speak for all of them, but there's an included tour as well. So you're on a river, you're stopping right in that city, and you're getting off the ship, and a local person who lives in that city is giving you a tour of it. So now you're spending your time in maybe a small group of 20 or 30 people, and you're laughing together and making jokes about things that are happening, or you're commenting on the history of a place. And you really do grow these like attachments to one another.
Aw.
And that was, oh gosh, thinking about if that was possible going into it, I never would have imagined what it actually turned into. Like
Yeah.
meeting grandparents that were on an anniversary trip and they had grandkids like the same age as me. And so we bond over that because they miss their grandkids and I'm the
Yeah.
same age and they get to hang out with me for a little bit. Yeah, it was fun to be able to experience different people that way.
Just right off the bat, like it seems like like you said, completely different sort of vacation travel experience than anything I've certainly had.
Mhm.
So I'm very intrigued by that. But since we're talking about the dining and the food, let's get into it because I've heard a lot of just like different takes on how people feel about like how important food is to them when they travel, right?
Mhm.
It's important to me, but it's not make or break.
Mhm.
But like I love a good meal, you know what I mean? So what was that like for you? Is that important to you when you travel?
Definitely.
Okay.
I love food. So yeah, the food was incredible. And as you travel through, gosh, all these different locations, what they try to do is give you food local to the region as well.
I've heard that, which is one of the most intriguing things I think about a river cruise
Hmm.
for me. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's super cool.
Yeah. You could always get something kind of like standard if you're not into whatever that cuisine is, but it was nothing extreme that people weren't like eating.
Yeah.
And it was good. It was delicious. It was a great time. Can I just say the bartenders are also very heavy-handed. So so if that's not your vibe, the first night my dad and I got on and we're Long Island drinkers. And so we were about 2 Long Islands in and giggling at dinner and looking at each other like, "Oh crap." And so we had to ask our bartender to lighten those up a little bit for us for the rest of the week. So yeah, the service, the food, everything is excellent. Breakfast is like, standard breakfast. There's not anything
Yeah.
like crazy going on there. But with such a small amount of like passengers traveling, they make it a point to learn your name and know even kind of your preferences. One morning was an early morning for us to go do one of these excursions. And I decided I'm not going to go to breakfast. I'm just going to take a little extra time getting ready. And our server, our like waiter, packaged up breakfast and like brought it, sent it with my dad to like bring it to me to make sure that I
That's
ate that
so
morning.
nice.
And I'm like, this is just, yeah, the customer service was top notch.
yeah, oh my
It was
gosh.
cool.
So, I'm like, I have so many questions. But we were talking about, the food and like, the quality is outstanding, the service is
Mhm.
outstanding, but it is still all included.
Yeah, we paid for like an alcohol package, and I think it was
Oh,
like
okay.
$150 for both of us. And it was
Like per
otherwise
day?
no, for the week.
That's a
Otherwise
steal.
it was you got like beer and wine at dinner.
Okay.
if you didn't do the extra.
But food is included.
Mhm.
So since they only had the buffet and the dining room, I
The
don't
one
know.
restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, dining room.
Were there like set hours where it was like lunches from 2 to 4 or
Yeah.
like stuff like that?
Yeah.
So was the buffet open? I'm just thinking like on a ocean cruise or like at
Mhm.
an all-inclusive resort, you can pretty much find food anytime, day or night. Was it like that, or was it a
No.
little bit more you had to make sure you were planning for your meals?
Yep, you had to plan.
Okay.
That's right.
Was that like easy to adjust to, or what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, everything was really standard times, and you have a couple hours at lunch. So you don't have to be in there right at a specific time. They'll serve you lunch for a few hours. And dinner was kind of nice because then you've got everyone in there at the same time, like eating and hanging out together. So, um, yeah, it was not a challenge to adjust to at all. Plus, you're stopping in these cities and you're there all day. So you can get off and go eat. I mean, you're going to pay for anything that you
Of
eat at a
course.
restaurant
Yeah.
off the ship, but there was a lot of that happening as well of let's
Okay.
sit down and like have lunch at this local place and really really get a feel for it.
So before we get off the ship, because I
Mhm.
cannot wait to talk about what that was like, what else was on the ship for you to actually do? You know what I mean? So like we've
Mhm.
talked about the dining areas. You said that there was like an open deck that was just sort of like an observation deck in a
Yep.
way.
Yeah.
Okay, so just chairs and stuff like that.
That's right.
Was there anything else that was like I don't know, hot tubs or like
No hot tubs, no pools, no big activities. And this is I would say the age on the ship is a bit of like an older crowd. I was by far one of the youngest. I was probably the youngest except for there were two families that had
kids?
kids under 18. Otherwise I was 29 at the time if my math is right, and I was definitely the youngest person. Yeah.
So what was that like for you?
Oh, that was interesting. So, the blue hair that I'm sporting, and was also sporting at the time, that garners looks from an older generation from time to time.
Sure, yeah.
So, definitely, I think people, an day one, I felt a little bit out of place.
Okay.
But then you get to meet people and talk to people, and they get to meet you and talk to you as well, and it was smooth sailing after that.
Okay.
Mhm.
But it was noticeable that you were the
Oh,
youngest
yeah.
person there.
Oh, yeah. And we found out on the last day that the majority of people thought my dad and I were, like, married. So, you know, that's not fun.
I would have never thought about that. But kind of like, of course, right? Because like of the age difference, it's like she found her older man to treat her, and you're like, this is my dad, and I'm actually kind of bringing him. Like,
Right.
You could not have read this more wrong. Like,
Yeah.
oh no.
Uh-huh.
Oh, bless their hearts, as we say.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. So okay, so not a ton of activity. Was there at least like I don't know, a library?
Yep, there's a library. There were, like, puzzles.
Oh, I love a puzzle. I'm set. I'm good.
Yeah, but it was just very laid back. And yeah, if you were cruising down the river, most of the time people were sitting out on that observation deck, and you're just kind of hanging out. But there's so much to do when you're in port and in that city
Okay.
that fills up your time and that fills up
Perfect.
your activity.
So let's get into that. How long was your sailing?
I think it was 8 nights.
Okay.
7.
So how many?
7 or 8.
7 or
One of the
8
two.
nights. How
Sorry.
many stops did you have?
Oh gosh, I wrote them down. Let me count
Yay!
them.
I love it when people bring notes.
So 9 different cities.
So you were stopping every day.
Mhm.
Every single day you were in a new port.
Every day we were in a new port, and some days we were in 2. So I think there was like one day that we started off in the morning in, gosh, I think it was like Heidelberg, and then we ended up that evening, we stopped for a few hours in another location.
See, this is the most appealing thing to me about a river cruise is literally just the incredible amount of like distance that you're covering,
Yeah.
like all these cities that you get to go to. So every day you're in a new place, aside from the one that you went to Chew.
Mhm.
How much time are you spending there? Like actually in port, able to get off the ship?
Gosh, several hours. Like,
Yeah.
so most of the time, so we did a lot of the included tours, which you don't pay anything extra for. And then we did add in a couple extra excursions that we did pay for because they seemed interesting and I wanted to try them.
I didn't know included tours were even a thing
Oh,
with
yeah.
river cruises, so that's
Yeah.
really cool. So,
Mhm.
like, they're marketing themselves completely like, they don't want you to stay on the ship.
Right.
They want you to get out when you're in port.
Yeah. So in your cabin are like headsets, and when you get to port and you get off, they break you up into different groups, and then your guide is speaking into a mic basically. So you can be spread out and you don't have to worry about hearing them, and almost everything is some sort of a walking tour. So these people are walking you around the city, and then they kind of go, okay, your ship is back over there. Does everyone know how to get back? And they'll walk you back if you need to, but otherwise you're just left to your own devices, and you know the ship is leaving at 7 p.m. that night, and just be on it before it leaves. Um, so yeah, that was such an incredible experience to be able to hear from people that live there and live there like generationally, and even the history of the region as well. So obviously we know like World War II happened, and we're going to Germany and France and these places that were so affected by it. We stopped in Cologne, Germany, and they're very well known for their cathedral there. And to see this gorgeous, incredible cathedral that took over 600 years to build, which, like, we could even get into that
Yeah, it's
and the
crazy.
history of these places. I was like touching everything. Like, who touched this 800 years ago?
Yeah.
Like, we don't
They
have that kind
I
of
was
history in
I
the
was just gonna
US that
say,
it.
people say Americans love that kind of stuff, and I have yet to meet one who
Yeah.
doesn't. So, like, yeah.
Yeah, I did. I was just touching buildings, but you see this gorgeous, gorgeous cathedral, and surrounding it are these cement buildings. And it's because that area was bombed and all of that was lost. The cathedral still stands, but everything else around it is cement that was built very quickly and very sturdily. Um, and it's just kind of like your mind doesn't think about all of these things you're going to experience when you're like, I'm going to go on a river cruise and see all these
Yeah.
different places. And to hear like firsthand accounts from people who, as I said, like generally generationally live there.
Like, that's very real to
It's
them.
very it is, it's
Not that it's
very
not
real,
real to us, but you know what I mean? Like, that's a part of their everyday
and
existence.
yes, and for them to speak so, like, freely about it, like, you're in Germany hearing from a German person who's saying, like, "We learned some lessons along the way, and we never
Yeah.
wanna repeat these
Right.
things." It was just gosh, it was I kept saying it the entire cruise, like, "This is such an experience, like, a once in a lifetime experience," and by the end of it, I said, "I have to do this again." So, I will do it again with my husband.
Yeah.
Um,
Would you bring, because you have, a young family, would you bring your little kitties with you?
no.
No, adults only.
Mm-mm, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think not all of the cruise lines, but many of them do like an 18 or older type thing.
Okay.
I know Viking, that's the one I sailed on, and there were some families with us, which were excellent. We did not have any challenges with them, but shortly after our cruise, we did hear that they were shifting to an 18 or older
Yeah. Which, I
sailing. Yeah.
mean, if there's nothing there to entertain the kids,
No,
it's sort
there's
of just
not.
like letting you know what I mean? It's like, this probably won't be for them anyway.
Hmm.
Like, they're not really losing anything, I think, by,
Yeah.
like, really hammering in that demographic.
Hmm.
But would you wait until you were more of that age? Or since you said that in the end, you were a little uncomfortable in the beginning, but then the age thing didn't seem to matter further along.
Hmm.
So how do you feel about that now that you've like lived it?
So I'm planning for my husband and I to go again for our 20-year anniversary, which is in 4 years. So we can do the math on that. I'll be 39 at that point. So still,
Still a spring chicken, you know what I mean? A little young one, I'm guessing. I mean, I haven't been
yeah.
on one, but that was the impression I was
Hmm.
getting.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that has no hesitation for you. You're still very much like, I absolutely want to do it. Can't wait to experience this, like, with
Exactly.
my husband.
Hmm.
So what was your favorite place that you went to on your river cruise?
Ooh. So Amsterdam, which is kind of like that's where we started. That's where we got on. So we went into Amsterdam a day early, and I just love that city so much. On the actual cruise, that's a good question. There were so many places that had just that unique thing that made it so memorable. So we went to the Black Forest. And that same day, you could add in an additional excursion to go to Colmar, France. That city kind of inspired Beauty and the Beast,
right?
right?
It looks like a storybook.
It does, yeah. And so that was really cool to like get a picture in front of like the fountain that Belle is like reading a book or
Yeah.
like the sheep eats, so that was like a fun experience and a little bit extra and on, Black Forest Day. So it was kind of like a whimsical
Yeah.
day for me. And it was the last day. So I would say that one stands out between two different destinations. So you can get off the ship in the morning and see a castle, and then you cruise during the day, and there's 40 castles that you see. So it's like a 3-hour tour, basically, and you've got somebody who works on the ship that's giving you like a history of all these different castles that you're passing and these different landmarks. And I was so looking forward to it, and it was a beautiful day, and we had this tiny little rain cloud that sat over us and rained for that full 3 hours
Oh my
straight.
God.
And that is so memorable to me because my dad and I sat in the rain because we're looking around like it's a beautiful day. There's not a cloud in the sky. Certainly this is going to stop any second now. And 3 hours later, we were soaked to the bone. And other people had their umbrellas out, but the cruise line makes the most of it. They were like
Yeah.
serving us ice cream, which was kind of funny because we were cold
Yeah.
from the rain. But even the bartenders were giving us like Tabasco shots, like
Hot sauce?
it was like liquor with Tabasco in it to like warm us up. And everyone is wet, maybe not as soaking wet as we were because we refused the umbrellas for a while. But it was just like we were just having such a great time. Everybody was
Yeah.
having such a great time. So that wasn't necessarily a destination, but that was
A highlight.
a highlight
sure.
for sure. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, I feel like we've done a really good job of like highlighting the differences between like a river cruise and really any other vacation experience. But I know that you've done a lot of ocean cruising because I've been lucky enough to be with you sometimes. So if we could quickly, just like first things that come to mind, like rapid fire, main differences between river cruising and ocean cruising. Do you want to do it?
Sure.
All right, Bri, what are your main differences between a river cruise and an ocean cruise?
An ocean cruise is massive, and you are one of many, and nobody's going to know your name. So you can kind of disappear in the crowd, in my opinion. There's a lot to do. You can stay on the ship and not have to get off and experience a port because the ship is a huge experience in itself. A river cruise, it's like a floating hotel. It's like backpacking through Europe, except for you get to have one room and your room moves around Europe for you. Plus, it's a much more like intimate setting, and you get that experience of excellent customer service where everyone does know your name and is treating you with just absolute excellence all around the board. Plus that in-city guide and look at like this history that you probably haven't experienced before in that same way.
Yeah.
So I think big differences between the two. In my opinion, a cruise line for me is more of like a laid back vacation where I'm just going to sit and I'm going to hang out. A river cruise is more of an adventurous vacation where I'm going to go explore.
I would even say that the ocean cruise is a vacation and the river cruise, I'm going to go ahead and say that's travel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
For sure.
I think that counts
I can
as
agree
a
with
full
that.
travel experience. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm sold. I mean, like, I'm not like hard to sell on this show. I'm always like, that sounds great. Take me next time. But the age thing has always been a factor for me. But I think all the other things you said, the authenticity, the camaraderie, the true unique immersion that you get, and heck, who doesn't like to feel young? I don't know. So yeah, I mean, I'm very down, and I hope that you have the best time in 4 years.
Yep.
When you get to go with your husband, and then maybe you can come back and tell us about your next one. Maybe we'll still be going. Who knows?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, Bri, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Did you have fun?
An excellent time.
Good. I'm so glad. And then you guys, we want to hear from you. We want to know your stories and your opinions about river cruising. So please share them with us. Drop them in the comments anywhere on social media using our hashtag Travel Stories Unpacked, or find us on Reddit. And keep coming back as we're going to keep unpacking all things travel. This podcast is brought to you by KHM Travel Group, a leading host agency for independent travel agents. Go to khmtravel.com to learn more.